my week four NFL money line predictions and best bets. Last week I did go 10 and 6 in the money line. I did go 3 for 5 in best bets. What that does is it puts me going into week four on the year at 32 and 16 in the money line, which I will easily take at this point in the year. 9 for 15 in best bets. We've gone 3 for 5 every week this year, which, hey, I mean, that's pretty good. I'd like to get a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5 week. And I will say, if there's a week to do it, I think it's this week. I love my picks. I think they're very strong. I think we do know who the have and have nots are in the league at this point. And I think home favorites are going to roll this week in most cases. There's also a lot of games that I'm going to stay away from. And the Thursday night football game, in terms of betting, is one of those that I'm going to stay away from. It's Sam Darnold and the Seattle Seahawks. So Sam Darnold is currently the number one rated quarterback by Pro Football Focus. I would have not predicted that going into the season. They take on Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, who are 1.5 point dogs at home as a division underdog at home on a short week. Seattle always plays Arizona well. Arizona is coming off that devastating loss at San Francisco and the game-winning field goal by the Niners. Seattle is coming off the blowout win against New Orleans, where they essentially didn't even have to play starters in the second half. So, I liked Arizona more than Seattle going into the year. I think it's a tricky spot for both teams, but I think with Arizona being 2-1, Seattle being 2-1, but Seattle getting all the momentum, with Arizona and Seattle both already losing a game to the Niners in the division, this is a big game for both. I think when you look at the quarterbacks, even though Sam Darnold has been playing better this season, I'll take Kyler Murray over Sam Darnold. I think, Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't know what's happened to him, and that may be the big loss for me on Arizona when it comes to this season, because that's one of the reasons why I predicted them to be a wild card team. The Seahawks defense has played very well under Mike McDonald, but again, they have played the Saints. They played Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was winning that game until some weird special teams plays occurred, and then San Francisco week one, they did not look very good. So I think Arizona is going to want to pieces up front, especially in that defensive line that can be disruptive. This is a low scoring game. I think home teams on Thursday night typically have the advantage, especially if they're evenly matched the way I think these two teams are. So I'll take Arizona at home. And then in our first international game of the year, we're going to Dublin, Ireland, ladies and gentlemen, as Kevin O'Connell, Carson Wentz, the Minnesota Vikings take on Aaron Rodgers, Mike Tomlin, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's very telling. The Vikings in a neutral site game are favored on the road by 2.5. That means Vegas thinks they are the better team. I do think they are the better team. We saw what Brian Flores did with the Vikings last year, week five, internationally in London against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. It wasn't pretty. The Steelers won that game against New England last week in New England by pure luck, by Ramondre Stevenson fumbling the football twice, by Drake May just throwing some terrible interceptions. Now, I don't think the Vikings defense is going to cause many turnovers. I don't think they're going to rattle Aaron Rodgers the way they rattled Jake Browning. We'll see. I think Mike Tomlin's going to do a very good job against Carson Wentz. I feel like this is another low-scoring 20-17 game. I do think let's take the offensive coach over the defensive coach here. Pittsburgh's offense, ever since week one, has really struggled. And again, that's probably because Aaron Rodgers had very familiarity with the Jets. Now he does have familiarity with the Vikings too, but this is a different Vikings team that he's seen. I mentioned he's seen him last year with the Jets, but this is a different Vikings team that he's seen since his time in Green Bay. So take it or leave it. Very interesting game. It's a stay away game for me. It's going to be a low scoring, close game, but I'll take Minnesota. Then my Eagles are going on the road to take on the 3-0 Bucks. This is once again, just like the Rams game was two 2-0 teams, this is two 3-0 teams. Tampa Bay has won every single game on a game-winning drive this year. But here's the thing, and this is what makes me nervous. Not only is it my birthday weekend, because my birthday is on Monday, September 29th, and the Eagles always typically do lose on my birthday. But the Eagles have struggled in the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni era against two teams. the Seahawks and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we have not defeated the Bucks. Or excuse me, we have defeated the Bucks. We're 1-2 since Baker Mayfield took over in Tampa. We won that game in 2023, weirdly. That was a weird game. That was a Monday night game where the Eagles, I believe, won 25-11 or something like that. And the last two times we played Tampa, the playoff game in 2023, then week four in 2024, the Buccaneers won. What I will say about that game last year was that was a game where A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both missed the game. And the last time the Philadelphia Eagles lost a game, I should say, that Jalen Hurts started and finished was about 365 days ago because it was September 29th, 2024 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week four. Will history repeat itself? Again, I think it's very possible. I don't feel great about this game as an Eagles fan. The one silver lining for me is Mike Evans is not going to be in there for Tampa Bay, though Emeka Buka has proven himself as a very good wide receiver, and we do have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I hopefully think that's going to be the difference. I'll take my Eagles to win, but I don't feel good about it. Then, my first bet on the board. I feel strongly about this. I'm taking the Lions. They're heavy favorites, 8.5. I'm surprised it's only 8.5. I think Vegas has too much respect for the Browns defense, but Joe Flacco cannot move the ball. And I think Aiden Hutchinson of that Lions offensive line, or defensive line, I should say, is going to take apart the Browns offensive line and Joe Flacco in the pocket the way they did against a mobile quarterback in Lamar Jackson on Monday night. Now, the Browns defense has been very good. Myles Garrett has returned back to prime form. Mason Graham has been unbelievable as a rookie. Carson Swivenger, the linebacker out of UCLA, looks like he could be the next Luke Kuechly. The Browns defense is keeping them in games, but I think the offense creates too many turnovers. I think Jared Goff and that fast track in the dome. I think this could get very ugly by the second half in this Lions Browns game. I think the Lions will take care of business. They have a lot of hard games coming up, so this could be a look ahead game, but I don't think Dan Campbell's going to let his team believe in look ahead games. Then I'm also going to take the Atlanta Falcons plus 1.5. You know my belief that when a team gets embarrassed, they always bounce back the next week. Look at the Vikings, week two. They got embarrassed by the Atlanta Falcons. They bounced back. They put, 50 on the head almost of the Cincinnati Bengals. I think Michael Penix and the Falcons are better than what the performance showed against Carolina. I think they're more that 2-1 team than they are that team that showed up in week three. We saw these two teams go to overtime last year. We still don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to play or not, especially if it's Marcus Mariota. I like this line of Atlanta plus 1.5. I don't think Ricky Morris is going to overlook Marcus Mariota. Now, of course, Dan Quinn is coming back to Atlanta. That's sort of an interesting storyline. But I think the bigger storyline here is unlike last year, the Falcons do have a pass rush. They overlook the Panthers. They're not going to overlook the Commanders, who had a pretty convincing win in week three against the Raiders. I'm still not convinced the Commanders are an absolute world beater. I don't know if they've still played their best game. I think there's another level that they need to get to. I like Atlanta plus 1.5. Then Jackson Dart is making his first start of the year for the New York Giants. I don't think it matters. I like the Chargers minus 6.5. If this was at 8.5, 9, or 10, I wouldn't take it. I think the number is too good not to get here. Jesse Minter may be one of the best defensive coordinators, along with Vic Fangio, in the entire NFL. He terrorizes rookie quarterbacks, and Jim Harbaugh and this LA Chargers team are not going to take the New York Giants lightly. I think they go in. I think they play bully ball against a Giants team who, yes, will play inspired by Jackson Dart. I'm surprised they didn't throw him in next week against the Saints. I think it's a desperate deploy move by the Giants. I don't think it's going to go well. Listen, the note 8 theory is real, right? Could Jackson Dart go out there and make big plays? Sure he can, but I think this Chargers team is just offensive line, run the football, Justin Herbert with time, making big plays. Um, I don't see a way the Giants match up here very well against the Chargers, and I think the Chargers will win by at least a touchdown. Obviously, Bills win against the Saints. I'm taking them in Survivor. 16.5 is way too much. I'd be most shocked in the world if the Saints pull off this upset. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it. Then you get to Panthers at the Patriots. I am going to take New England -5.5 here. I think Carolina goes back to what they were. I think New England has had two tough home losses to the Raiders and Steelers, and that Steelers loss was mostly because of turnovers. To me, I think New England's defense, led by Mike Vrabel, is going to have an old classic Bill Belichick feel to it this week, where they're going to handicap Bryce Young. They're going to make Bryce Young see ghosts. I don't see Carolina having a lot of success on the road in this game. New England was some people's surprise team of the week this year. I had them at 9 wins. I had them just missing the playoffs. I think in order for them to hit their over-under of 7.5, they got to win this game. And Bryce Young had a good performance last week against the Falcons, but Bryce Young seems to only beat the Falcons, and their defense also made a lot of good plays. I think as long as Drake May keeps the ball relatively turnover free, New England could potentially roll here. I think the Patriots are better than what their record says. I think Carolina has played like an 0-3 team, and they're 1-2. So I like New England to cover 5.5. Then in a matchup where we all expected these teams to be 0-3, right? It's the Titans and the Texans. And listen, the Titans, I said going into the year, I thought Cam Ward was going to have some moments, but it was going to be rocky because they have nothing around him. He's been bad, even though he's made a couple of flash plays. And the Houston Texans is 0-3. We know how desperate they are. I took them last week when they were desperate. They were +1.5 underdogs against Jacksonville. I think with how bad they look, and their offensive line's still not great, and their two receivers out of Iowa State have not popped off. The fact they're 7.5 point favorites in a division rivalry at home tells you Vegas thinks they are way better than the Tennessee Titans. I think this is a rout. I think the Houston Texans, their season's on the line. I thought their season was on the line last week at Jacksonville. Well, it's really on the line now against Tennessee. If you start 0-4, if you're a Houston Texan, the team that was favored to win this AFC South division, someone is getting fired. So I think the Texans cover 7.5. And if you're keeping track at home, those are all five of my best bets. I have all five of my best bets this week in the 1 o'clock window. I considered six bets. I'll get to that other bet when we get to the game that I was considering. But Detroit -8.5, Atlanta +1.5, Chargers -6.5, Houston -7.5, and New England -5.5 are my best bets. Jacksonville at San Francisco. The Jags are 3.5 point dogs, and whether it's Mac Jones or Brock Purdy, I don't care. I think Jacksonville goes in. I think they pull off the upset. I think William Cohen, being a former offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, he's played San Francisco a lot. He knows that personnel, he knows that scheme. And listen, it's taken the Niners down to the wire to beat the Saints and the Cardinals with Mac Jones, who's been good. He hasn't been great. Now Nick Bosa is out for the year. I don't know where the Niners are going to get the pass rush from. And yes, they're 3-0, but we talked about this going into the year, how much of a cupcake schedule San Francisco had. George Kittle was still out. All they really have is Christian McCaffrey and Ricky Pearsall, who has popped. I think the Niners can move the ball on Jacksonville, but I also think Jacksonville can move the ball on San Francisco. And I think Trevor Lawrence has found the coach that will resurrect his career in Liam Cohen. Jacksonville, you could make an argument if it wasn't for a couple of silly turnovers, could be 3-0 going into this game as well. So I like Jacksonville. Again, I'm too chicken to take it because I think there's better lines out there, but I like them to pull off the upset. Then I think the Colts no longer remain undefeated. I like the Rams to beat them. This will be a good test for Daniel Jones, who has moved the ball all around. They've only had one punt going into this game, but the Rams are going to be angry following that devastating loss with the blocked field goal attempt by Jordan Davis and the Eagles. They now go back home. They've already defeated the Texans and Titans this year. I think they need to take care of business in the AFC South. They know their schedule is going to get harder. This is a winnable game for them. I wouldn't be surprised if they cover the 3.5. Listen, I think Daniel Jones played very well with Shane Steichen. I think the Colts are going to move the ball on the Rams, but I also think this is the best defense easily Daniel Jones has played so far. I don't believe Denver's defense is as good as it was a year ago. Then Chicago at Las Vegas. And the Bears were 0-2. They gave up over 50 points to the Detroit Lions, and the sky felt like it was falling. However, with that being said, you get these next two wins against the Cowboys, check, and the Raiders, check. You're 2-2 going into the bye, and you have 2 weeks to prepare for the ultimate rematch, the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary game that ended your season a year ago. The Raiders were my surprise team in the AFC. I had them going 10-7 and being the number 7 seed in the AFC West. These were actually both my 7 seeds in both conferences. Geno Smith has just turned the ball over way too much for the Raiders, leaving that defense, which doesn't have a lot of talent outside of Max Crosby anyway, in short fields. They're not getting the ball so much to Brock Bowers. They are stacking the box against Ashton Genty. Teams are daring Geno Smith to throw the football. And outside of Taylor Tucker, the Raiders have not been that productive on offense. I think Dennis Allen, who's a very aggressive defensive coordinator, sends the house here. I don't think it's going to be a particularly clean game against Caleb Williams. I think Pete Carroll and that defense led by Patrick Graham is going to show him a bunch of different looks. But I think the Bears, you know, and Ben Johnson come out here. They get their mojo back. They go into Vegas. It's a dome, so they're not going to be uncomfortable going east to west. I like Chicago here. I think the fact they're favored by, or they are underdogs by 1.5, means these two teams are pretty relatively close. Now, I am shocked by the Chiefs being 2.5 point underdogs in a game between two 1-2 teams between the Ravens and Chiefs. I think this means more to both teams than if they were 3-0, because one of these teams are going to fall to 1-3. And if it's Kansas City that falls to 1-3 and the Chargers are 4-0, you can pretty much call the AFC West a wrap, in my opinion, for the Los Angeles Chargers. But when it comes to this game, the Chiefs are 2.5 point underdogs at home, which is insane to me, especially the way Baltimore played. I think the Chiefs should be 1.5 point or 1 point favorites. I really think this is a pick 'em game. The thing that I can't get out of my head is until Baltimore beats Kansas City again, which they have not done in 4 years, I don't think I can pick them. We'll see if Xavier Worthy comes back for the Chiefs. I think that will be a big weapon for them to split the field. But this Ravens defense has been bad. The Ravens defense gets better as the year goes on, but they are leaking oil right now. Now, they did get embarrassed by the Lions on Monday Night Football. So I think with that being said, I think with Jim Nantz and Tony Romo on the call here for such a big game, 4:25 Eastern on CBS, they're going to play their best. I think they know how much this means, but I think the Chiefs are going to try to attempt to do what the Lions did, which was shut down Derrick Henry and force Lamar Jackson to beat them from the pocket. We know this Chiefs defense is still good. I think this will be a very low scoring game. I think it's very similar to the Super Bowl rematch where it's 20-17. Whoever makes the less amount of mistakes will win the game. I think the team that makes the less amount of mistakes will be the Chiefs. Then the other game I was considering for best bets was Green Bay, who was CD Lamb out at -6.5. I think they easily cover. I think this could be a rout against Dallas on Sunday Night Football. My only hesitation is it is the return of Michael Parsons, and I think the Cowboys are going to be motivated. I think the Cowboys are going to hear all week how this is going to be a blowout, how they are going to get destroyed, and we saw how much that happened week 1. And Brian Schottenheimer in this offense has been very creative early on. They've been able to run the football. I think the key to this game for Green Bay is going to be get the lead early, force Dak Prescott to throw the football, force him to maybe force some balls to George Pickens and get turnovers. I think Michael Parsons has a chance to terrorize this Dallas offensive line. Again, if we had 6 picks, this would be my sixth pick. I think this is an absolute blowout. Um, but I'm gonna stay away from it just because I think the fact that Dallas is gonna hear all week that they're going to get blown out, and I think this could be a closer-ish game that maybe people don't expect. I mean, every time we expect it to be a blowout. Look at Dolphins Bills last Thursday night. Miami hung in there and they got the backdoor cover. So, speaking of Miami, they host the Jets. Now, I'm assuming Tyrod Taylor is going to play for the Jets. I think going down to Miami on a Monday night, the Dolphins have played better over these last 2 weeks against divisional opponents. I think Aaron Glenn and his aggressive man coverage defensive style is not the style you want to play against the Dolphins. Honestly, I think the fact that they're 2.5 point favorites shocked me because this really should feel like a pick 'em. It means Vegas think Miami is a lot better. So I'll take the Dolphins at home. And then in the second part of that doubleheader, Cincinnati looked embarrassed last week by Minnesota. I do think they play well, but this is a good defense they're going up against. Again, I don't think it's as good as last year, but I think Denver, there's a lot of expectations on Denver that, they could be the AFC West champions this year. I did not believe that. But I think in order for people to believe in the Broncos, they have to win this game. Bo Nix will have a bounce back game. I would not be shocked if Denver covers the 7 and wins by a touchdown, but I don't think it's going to be a complete wipeout because I think Cincinnati was embarrassed by Minnesota. And again, every time you get embarrassed, you play well the next week. So to recap, in the money line, I have Arizona over Seattle, Minnesota over Pittsburgh in Dublin, Philly over Tampa, Detroit over Cleveland, Atlanta over Washington, the Chargers over the Giants, Buffalo over New Orleans, New England over Carolina, Houston over Tennessee, Jacksonville over San Francisco, the LA Rams over the Indianapolis Colts, Chicago over Vegas, Kansas City over Baltimore, Green Bay over Dallas, Miami over the Jets, and Denver over Cincinnati. My top 5 bets for week 4 of the 2025 NFL season are: I like the Lions -8.5 to cover against the Browns. My one dog, I like the Falcons +1.5 to win at home against the Commanders. I like the Chargers on the road in Jackson Dart's first start to cover 6.5. I like New England -5.5 to cover against Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. And I like the Texans -7.5 to avoid that 0-4 start to cover against Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.